Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent that the pending amendment be set aside, and that I ask unanimous consent to call up amendment number 1500.
Is there objection? Without objection. Without objection, the clerk will report.
The senator from Oklahoma, Mr. Inhofe, for himself and Mrs. Hutchison, proposes an amendment numbered 1500. At the end of the amendment, insert the following: prohibition on unauthorized earmarks.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading of the amendment.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I would like to ask unanimous consent that Senator Susan Collins be added as no, I withdraw that amendment, that request. Mr. President, today I understand that Senator Toomey is going to be introducing an amendment that will it's quite an oversimplification to say it this way, but it would make permanent the temporary ban on earmarks. And I think this is something that we have talked about and talked about and talked about on this floor. In fact, last time we talked about the amendment to put a moratorium on earmarks, my conservative rating of #1 in the United States Senate moved to #20 because I was telling the truth and not demagoguing an issue. The problem we have is this. When the House of Representatives, first of all, came up some time ago, 2 years ago, with doing away with earmarks, putting a moratorium on earmarks, then they defined what that moratorium was, and it defined an earmark as in a certain House rule, and the bottom line is this. It said it is any kind of an appropriation or authorization. Now, here's where the problem is, because everybody is upset with the process that's taken place by Democrats and Republicans on the floor of this Senate. And I won't name names, but I think most of the members know the ones I'm talking about. Many of them are the members of the Appropriation Committee, where they'd sit down during the course of an appropriation bill and they'd swap out deals, favors, and get things for their state. And this is the type of thing that is wrong, and it shouldn't take place. But I'm reminded, I have to remind my friends here, that we have a Constitution of this country. Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution makes it very clear that we, those of us in this chamber and in the House chamber across the hall, have a primary constitutional responsibility, and that is to authorize and appropriate. That's what Article 1, Section 9 says we're supposed to be doing. Now, if you go back and you study what Justice Joseph Story back in 1833 talked about, he kind of made the interpretation of the intent of the Constitution insofar as what our duties and the President's were. He said very clearly that we are doing this because if the President has the power to do the appropriating, or if you want to call it earmarks, you can call it earmarks, appropriating or authorization, that's too much power in the hands of one person. And so he's very specific that our founding fathers wanted to make sure that the President doesn't do this. So, now what happens today? Today we get a budget from the President, which is taking place right now as we speak. And I could talk about this, all the deficits in the budget and all that, but that's not my purpose for being here. My purpose for being here is to articulate how things are working today and how they have worked up until the moratorium language came into effect. The President sends a budget to Congress. Then that's supposed to go to authorizing committees. I'm on 2 authorizing committees. One is Environment and Public Works. One is the Senate Armed Services Committee. The Senate Armed Services Committee is staffed with experts in areas of missile defense, in areas of national defense, in areas of strike vehicles, in areas of lift capacity, all of the areas that are in his budget, along with every area of national defense. But here's the thing, these are experts, and so they advise us as we have our meetings and we're drafting the Senate Armed Services Committee, SASC, the Defense Authorization Bill, the NDAA, as we did just a few months ago, and we come up with how we think we should be spending the money to defend America within the parameters of the President's budget. I'm going to give you an example. A couple of years ago, before there was any discussion on the moratorium, the President had in his budget $330 million to go to a launching system. It was called a bucket of rockets. It's a good system. It's something that we need, something that would be very helpful to have. But with the limited resources we have, and the fact that we're fighting a war on two fronts at that time, we made a determination in the Senate Armed Services Committee that that $330 million would be better spent if we bought 6 new F-18E and F models. Those are strike vehicles. And one of the reasons for that was that the President in his budget did away with the only 5th generation fighter that we had, the F-22. This is back in his first budget. And he's talking about delaying the F-35, which is one that the Joint Strike Fighter, which is going to be necessary to have. So we made that decision. And that was made by the majority of the members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. It had nothing to do with whose home state makes the F-18. None of that made any difference. It's just that we can do a lot more to defend America by having 6 new F-18s than we could the launching system called a bucket of rockets. Now, if you do that today, that's an earmark. They'll say, well, no, that wasn't in the President's budget. I have to remind everyone, it doesn't matter whether the President of the United States is a Democrat or Republican. The President is the guy that designs the budget. A lot of people don't know that. It's not the Democrats, not the Republicans, not the House, not the Senate. It's the President. So when he designs this budget, he makes a determination as how he thinks everything should be spent. And if we say that we cannot do authorization and appropriation, then that would be called an earmark, and there's a ban on earmarks. Now, the reason I kind of walk around the barn a long ways on this issue is that I have an amendment, and that amendment that I've just now brought up for consideration is Amendment number 1500. And what that does is it merely defines an earmark as an appropriation that has not been authorized. I just described the authorization process. If we go through that, then there aren't going to be any earmarks in the way that most people think of earmarks, but we will be doing our duty. And I feel very confident that we're going to be able to get this passed. Several of the individuals here, and very responsibly, have talked about this. For example, Senator Toomey said yesterday on the floor that some earmarks ought to be funded, but they ought to be funded with transparency and in an honest way to evaluate by an authorizing committee. So here's the author of the ban on earmarks agreeing that we need to, if we go through an authorization process, it's all right to fulfill our constitutional function of appropriating and authorizing. Senator Coburn, my junior senator, said it is not wrong to go through an authorization process where your colleagues can actually see it. It is wrong to hide something in a bill. Agree. We all agree on that. That was a year ago he made that statement. Senator McCain, who, by the way, I introduced this amendment in a bill form last year. He was my co-sponsor. We introduced it together, and that was merely changing the definition of an earmark as an appropriation or spending that hasn't been authorized. Senator McCain had said some of those earmarks are worthy. If they're worthy, they should be authorized. But that's the whole issue. Now, I can understand some Democrats wanting to do away with congressional earmarks, because if they do that, it goes right back to Obama. If I were in a position where I felt that President Obama or any other president could do a better job of appropriating money, that would be another motivation to do this. But for responsible conservatives who believe in what the Constitution says, this is a very easy solution to the problem. The amendment will be brought up, and I don't know yet. I suppose I could talk to and find out just what our timing is going to be. But the amendment that I've offered simply bans any congressional earmark that is not first authorized. If we do this, instead of an outright ban, it will preserve our ability to keep the President's power in check. I would hope that many of my colleagues go back and read what our founding fathers had in mind when they talked about the Article 1 of the Constitution. And I think that they would find that they made it very clear that we want to have a separation of those powers, so you don't have either the House and the Senate or the Presidency doing everything. Instead, we should follow the Constitution. So that's what my amendment's all about, and I'll be looking forward to bringing it up. I think it probably will be considered today, and I'll look forward to that. With that, I'll yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senators continue to work on the Stock Act, preventing insider trading by members of Congress. Right now, they are working on the Inhofe Amendment as they continue to offer amendments throughout the day. We do expect more amendments and related votes through the rest of the week. The Senate is expected to hold a closed-door briefing on cybersecurity issues this afternoon at about 4 p.m. Eastern. They may go into recess for that. We'll let you know as we find out more about that. Earlier today, President Obama gave remarks at a community center in Falls Church, Virginia. He discussed a new effort to help struggling homeowners and the economy. That is available in the C-SPAN video library if you'd like to see that. Tomorrow, the President will be at the 60th Annual National Prayer Breakfast. Coverage gets underway at 8 a.m. Eastern here on C-SPAN 2.
We have an incredibly important opportunity here to do something so basic, so common sense, to begin restoring the faith and trust that the American people have in this institution. And we have a responsibility to do it right, to show without question, without any ambiguity, that all members of Congress, their staffs and federal employees, play by the exact same rules as everyday Americans. The American people deserve to know that their lawmakers' only interest is in what's best for the country, not their financial interests. Members of Congress, their family, their staff, and federal employees should not be able to gain any personal profit from information that they have access to that ordinary Americans don't. Whether it's trading stock or making inside real estate deal, it is simply not right. Nobody should be above the rules. The common sense bill before us would finally codify this principle into law as it should be. Chairman Lieberman, Ranking Member Collins, Scott Brown, and their committee members and staff have crafted a very strong bipartisan bill with teeth that is narrowly tailored and targeted to ensure that we achieve this very common goal. Because of this bipartisan work, last night this chamber came together in what has become nearly an unprecedented fashion these days and voted almost unanimously to begin debate on this sorely needed legislation. As we continue the debate here, I urge my colleagues, let's focus on the specific task at hand. Let's show the American people that we can come together and get this thing done to begin to restore their trust in us. If there are ideas to make the bill stronger, let's debate them. But let's not get bogged down in the politics as usual with non-germane side issues that will prevent us from swiftly moving on an up or down vote the American people expect of us. We're already starting in a strong position with our colleagues in the House. This Stock Act legislation is very similar to legislation introduced by my colleague in the New York delegation, Congresswoman Louise Slaughter, and Congressman Tim Walz. I want to thank them for their long-standing advocacy and focus and leadership on this important issue. Our bill, which has received the support of at least 7 good government groups, covers several very important principles. First, members of Congress, their families, their staff, and federal employees should be barred from gaining any personal profit on the basis of knowledge gained through their congressional service or from using knowledge to tip off anyone else. This bill will, for the first time, establish a clear fiduciary responsibility to the people that we serve. This simple step removes any present doubts as to whether the SEC and the CFTC are empowered to investigate and prosecute cases involving insider trading of securities from using this non-public information. It also provides additional teeth. Such acts would also be in violation of Congress's own rules to make it clear that this activity is inappropriate and subject members to additional disciplinary members by this very body. Second, members should be required to disclose major transactions within 30 days to make this information available online for their constituents to see, providing dramatically improved oversight and accountability. We should be able to agree these reports should be available in the light of day and not stored in some dusty back room. I should note, the committee heard experts testifying during a Senate hearing that reducing this new reporting requirement to 90 days was not good enough. The committee listened to these experts carefully, and the bill has been strengthened and currently has the 30-day proposal. A sea change of improvement from the current reporting requirements of a yearly reporting requirement on a paper document. Some critics say this bill is unnecessary and already covered under current statutes. I have spoken with experts tasked in the past with the investigations of this nature, and they strongly disagree. We must make it clear as day and unambiguous that this kind of behavior is illegal. President Obama asked us in the State of the Union, send him the bill, he'll sign it right away. We should not delay. This is the time to act. Let us show people who send us here that we can come together and do the right thing. Let's show them that we know they deserve a government that's worthy of them. We have an opportunity to take a step toward restoring some of the faith that's been lost in Washington and in this institution. I urge my colleagues to seize this opportunity. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The Senate in a quorum calls they continue for a third-day debate on a bill that would make it illegal for members of Congress and their staff to trade stocks based on non-public information. They are considering a number of amendments. David Hawkins in Congressional Quarterly writing today that a vote is expected on a Republican proposal to apply the legislation's new restrictions and disclosure requirements to the executive branch officials, which would be in line with what House GOP members would like to see. But he writes that Harry Reid has already lost patience with all the tangential and totally unrelated proposed amendments, term limits for members of Congress, no bonuses for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac executives, no government pensions for lawmakers turned lobbyists, etc., and that he, in effect, invited by promising an open, wide debate. He writes that he may try to get 60 votes by cutting off the debate within the next 2 days. So they continue here in a quorum call. The pending amendment is by Senator Inhofe. The Senate later today is expected to recess, at least briefly, for a closed-door session, closed-door briefing on cybersecurity. We also understand that Republican senators are holding a off-the-floor meeting today. The House, meanwhile, today is considering a number of bills, including one that would repeal the Class Act, which is part of the health care law, and it provides long-term health care services. A vote on that is expected this afternoon about 5 o'clock. You can follow the House on C-SPAN. The underlying bill on the Senate floor would ban lawmakers and congressional aides from trading in stocks or other securities based on non-public information, the so-called Stock Act, a third day of consideration of the legislation. Harry Reid this morning in his leader comments encouraged Republicans to come to an agreement to limit the amendments on that bill. Some dozen amendments or so have been filed already. Dean Heller of Nevada has 2 of them, both of which deal with congressional pay. One of those amendments would continue an existing freeze on the pay of most federal workers to the end of 2013. The House took up a similar measure earlier today, and a vote likely on that later this afternoon. The main item on the House agenda is a bill on the House side coming up this afternoon that deals with the existing health care law, a part of the health care law known as the Class Act, which is long-term care insurance. 3 hours of debate ahead on that, an hour of general debate and possibly 3 hours on amendment, and expected votes again in the House at about 5 o'clock. You can follow that on C-SPAN. Here on the Senate side today, they are considering the Stock Act. There may be a break here this afternoon, a likely break at about 4, a recess, we understand, for a briefing for senators on cybersecurity.
President.
Senator from California.
Mr. President, I call be lifted.
Without objection, the senator is recognized.